Okay, I'm gonna do a quick video here. Just woke up. Hair's messy, but I believe if you can't see someone at their worst, you don't deserve to see them at their best. So I'm gonna do a video here today on education, scientific indoctrination, and brainwashing. And I'm gonna start by introducing the name of a character. Some people might not have heard of him. His name is John D. Rockefeller. And Rockefeller is a very powerful man. He was the owner of a company, Standard Oil Company. This company basically runs the show when it comes to oil. So you can imagine how rich he was, since everything in our current military industrial complex runs off of oil. He created what is known as the General Education Board, and he also created another foundation which funds all of the schools, all of the curriculums, everything that goes into creating education the way it is. Now, this is what he said. John D. Rockefeller said. He said, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." Okay, so he had an impetus, he had an agenda behind creating the General Education Board and creating schools, compulsory schooling, because he had a vision for society. Now, most people can't believe that someone would have the audacity to create such a long plan that actually goes into the future, because these people are so pathetic and they're such big losers that they could never have the virtue or the loyalty to look past their own generation. I remember when I was first explaining the foundations and the families and how it's been going for fucking generations to certain people, and they're like, no, they would never. Why would they do something that's not going to be in their lifetime? Again, these people are so pathetic. They're such sheep that all they think about is their base immediate animal needs. They have no higher consciousness. So if you run into one of these people, just don't say a thing. Just smile and okay. This is what school really teaches kids. Number one, that truth comes from authority, and that there's such a thing as authority, and that other people have a legitimate right to tell you what to do, how to think, how to act, which is bullshit. If you study natural law, you'll know that no one has the right, no one has the authority to force you to think a certain way or to force you to do something. The second trait of what schools really teach children. The second trait, characteristic. The second characteristic of what schools really teach children. They teach children that intelligence is the ability to remember and repeat. They teach you that you're smart if you can memorize something and repeat it, and that's it. They teach you that accurate memory and repetition are rewarded. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Accurately memorize things. I can see this more than most people because I'm a teacher and I work in a school and I see what the curriculums are. And we have things like morning rituals that we do where we line the kids all up and they have to look at their national flag and say this anthem and pledge allegiance to it. And they have no fucking clue what they're even talking about, or they have no clue about the history of their country or even what countries are made for, but they're pledging allegiance for it. It's just getting them early, trying to get them patriotic and loyal to their corporate country early. So the fourth characteristic, moving on here, non-compliance is punished. All right, if you don't conform with the group, you're going to be punished. If you try and stand out and speak out against the system, you're going to get punished. Which, I mean, how is that free thinking? All these liberals were like, we're free thinkers. But how are you fucking free thinking if when I speak out against the corrupt system, you try and silence me? How the fuck is that free speech or free thinking, right? So, they'll push free thinking and free speech, but it's like, oh, free thinking and free speech within our little fucking box of what is appropriate and what is acceptable to talk about. You know, as long as you're supporting the system and the foundations, then you can be as free as you want. Okay, so it's free speech with an asterisk attached. And then the last, of course, conform intellectually and socially. So again, you got to stand in line with everyone else. You got to repeat all the same propaganda rubbish. You have to uh, show that you can't think for yourself. Because if you show that you are thinking for yourself and you're questioning things, then you are going to be one of the outsiders. And if you're an outsider, that's going to go against one of humanity's very strong instincts, which we have. We have a herd instinct within us. And we want to fit in with everyone, especially young kids. Young kids are extremely influenced by peer pressure. You know, I see it every day. They don't want to be an outsider. They want to fit in with the group. But you know what I noticed? The kids who are the outsiders are the fucking smartest, most beautiful people. They're the most beautiful people inside. Absolutely. And I've taken such a soft spot for so many of those kids at my school, and that's the only good thing that I have about my job is being there for those kids who are outsiders, because I was one too, and I know exactly what it's like to be someone who has a strong intuition and who knows, hey, this is fucked up, this is wrong, and to try and rebel against it, and to try and point out how fucked up it is in your own. Oftentimes they do it in misguided or unproductive ways, but still you can see that the effort is there. They don't want to conform to a system that mindlessly tells them to parrot information that they know is inherently wrong. So now there's a couple other really good pictures here. Now this picture, education for a global market economy. Now repeat after me. $5 a day is a fair and decent wage. Work is freedom. Work, spend, consume, death. This is the purpose of life. $5 a day is a fair and decent wage, says all the kids. Brilliant. This was done back in 1997. A big part of the Rockefellers is all the foundations that they support. And they have an agenda. Like I've said, they have an agenda. They don't want a nation of thinkers, they want a nation of workers. We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis. So here he's saying, all we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order. So, I mean, anyone who's got a shred of and real intelligence, like who can actually connect dots, will see that this is implying some very heavy shit. He's saying that we need to create the right crisis. He's saying that they create crises, and this is true. This is order ab chaos, order out of chaos. So they create the chaos, and then they predict through predictive programming, because they know us so well. They've gathered so much information on us. Human beings are the most studied species on the planet by far, barring none. They know what makes us tick. They know, through social media now, they know everything about us, and they're adding more information to you have a personal profile, and they're adding more information to your profile every day, and they put it into a supercomputer, and they can predict how you will respond, how you will react in certain situations, in a crisis, in a civil war, and they know everything about you. They know more about you than you know about yourself. That's pretty fucked up, eh? That's the world we live in. So they create the chaos, all right? People don't get this. People don't get that every fucking thing is planned, okay? Every fucking thing is planned. If something happens in politics, you can be damn well sure it was meant to happen that way. Sure, there are hiccups along the way. That was like the League of Nations, for example, is a good example I like to illustrate. So before the United Nations, which is now the acting body that regulates all UNESCO nations, all developed and developing nations, and implements governmental policy. People think the UN is this arbitrary, like, people think that the UN is this arbitrary and unimportant organization that has no real influence, has no real clout or power over policies, over business, over economies, and they couldn't be further from the truth. They couldn't be any more wrong. The UN has incredible power. They're the one who gives money. They're the one who allocates funds for programs. They're the ones who can ultimately are the puppets of the banks. They work in very close unison with the banks. Okay, you have the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which works in very close conjunction with the United Nations. You have UNESCO, which is also created by Rockefeller, which is I'm trying to remember, what does UNESCO stand for? United Nations Science, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. So yes, UNESCO was created by the Rockefellers as well. Okay, um, these are huge organizations that give out massive injections of money for programs, for your media, for everything that you've seen on TV growing up. It all comes from one source, okay? This is politics, folks. This is literally how it is, okay? You have someone who's pretending to be like all the fucking ignorant dummies, who's pretending to understand their problems, who's telling them they're gonna solve their problems, and meanwhile they're fucking laughing at all these ignorant sheep. They are. They're laughing their asses off at you behind closed doors, where everything is done in secret. Okay, now there's another guy, Frederick T. Gates. You hear that last name, Gates? Does that ring any bells? He was a partner of Rockefeller, and they worked very closely together. In our dream, we have limited resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. Hear that? People yield themselves with perfect docility. They're perfectly tamed and calm and happy and entertained. The present educational conventions fade from our minds, and, unhampered by tradition, we work our own good will upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people, or any of their children, into philosophers or men of learning or of science. We are not to raise up among them authors, orators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not research for embryo great artists, painters, musicians. Nor will we cherish even the humbler ambition to raise up from among them lawyers, doctors, preachers, statesmen, of whom we now have ample supply. Wow. So the people they're most afraid of are the authors, the poets, the men of letters, the researchers, the artists, the musicians, because they really have the power to change things. And they're like, and if there are like people who are lawyers, who are noble and are trying to fight against the system, they're gonna get eaten up by the system anyways. You know, there are doctors, they're gonna try and go against the system. Many will try and most will fail. And we're okay with that. So that's essentially what Frederick T. Gates was saying. He was a business advisor to John D. Rockefeller. So there you go, folks. Making some connections. Open your eyes. Speak out against evil. Peace.